Part one, communication. What is a plan of communication?
I'm going to let you take this because you're more in the communication world, quite honestly.
Yeah. So for me, a plan of communication is just
As you said, this isn't a part of football coaching. This is.
it's really not, and it's it's
I'm probably going to
exactly
listen to this episode and think about how to plan our system of communication on. Quite honestly,
there you go. I think at the base level, a plan of communication it will just guide anyone who doesn't know what to do. It gives them a way to do that on their own. And so, really, in the military, what we're trying to always build is people who are they can be a self-starter. They can go out and operate. They don't need someone staring over their shoulder all the time. Um, the pride of their work is kind of their end goal, right? It's the thing that's going to keep them in check. We do have a trust but verify is a big comment for the Army, right? I'm going to trust you to get something done. And every once in a while, I'm going to come over and make sure you're doing it right, which is what we have to do a lot of time in football drills, right? You go to practice, you're the coordinator, you have a scheme, but you can't install, you can't run every drill every day for every one of your coaches. And so that's why I think the military and football coaching overlap so well. So realistically, it's just giving people what I like to say is left and right limits. That comes off of us going to the range and shooting weapons. You don't shoot past the range fan on the left or the right. Those are your left and right limits because you could like kill someone, right? There's a safety area. And so I get the same way, man. I think having a plan of communication fits so many things, whether it's discipline, drills, key reads. We talk about ASCA a lot on here. You know, ASCA is a place where you can use a plan of communication. You can have that set up where coaches don't have to come and ask you all the time, hey, what do you want me to do today? Well, you know what you're going to do today. You know what we're doing for this period is turnover circuit. Okay. So you know your left and right limit and you go out and you just make it happen. So I think that's really what a plan of communication is. It works even in the office, right? Some coaches are like afraid to talk to the head coach because, you know, that's a very big man. He's smart. He's busy. Part of your plan of communication may just be understanding there's an open door policy. Like, come in here anytime, right? You don't have to be afraid to come talk. I want to say it was my third year. So last year, down at Stillwell with Coach Collins' crew, and it was very big. If you see something, say something, because maybe there's something I'm not seeing, right? And that's been amplified this year at Owasso too on the offensive side of the ball. You know, on Friday nights, if we see something, hey, don't be afraid to run up to the coordinator and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Maybe you don't even know how to take advantage of it, but they do, right? And that can be a part of your plan. Just ensuring those open lines of communication are there. Coaches should never be afraid to talk when they're in the office, but they should know what the limitation is, right? If we're going through install and we're a speed option team and you go, hey, what if we ran the wing T this week? Probably outside of that left and right limit. We're not going to change scheme because this defense sucked against the wing T last week. Okay. So it just gives people that feel good feelings. I know what to say. I know what to do. Film breakdown's another place this works. There's so many places that we can have this plan.
One of the places that comes up first as far as why you need it, and I've heard this for years, and I probably was this guy initially. A lot of head coaches expect everyone that they hire to be a go-getter. In the military, you don't have the ability, you don't have the option to let somebody do nothing. What happens with a lot of coaches, they hire a kid 22 years old, just out of college, has never coached before, doesn't have a freaking clue what to do. No clue. And so I remember one of my very good friends, our first year, we're both coaching different sports, but one of our other friends, still friends with him to this day, was the head, I think it was soccer coach. And my other friend, who is a very successful coach today, so we can talk about this. Probably nobody will know who it is, but he's a very successful coach today. But I remember that the head soccer coach had hired him as an assistant that first year, and I was an assistant football coach. And so I knew, we all worked together in different capacities. And he told me one day, he said, if I don't tell him to do something, we were in the office, in the field house office. He said, if I don't tell him to do something, he will stand right there next to that trash can for 3 hours. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, man, I can't believe that he's that lazy. Like, I know this friend of mine. Actually, sort of I can, but but as I've gotten more experience, yeah, most people will. And you know what else? He's a really good coach now. Probably because eventually he had the confidence to go out there and do stuff. And also probably because at some point, well, at least for a while, I mean, he was being told, don't stand by the trash can, go do things. That's helpful. But eventually, you know how you get really good at coaching, like really fast, you just get thrown into the deep end and like you totally flail and then you figure it out. But most of us will we will default to nothing because we don't know what to do and we don't want to step on toes. It's like, um, we had one coach who, like completely reorganized the office one year. And, the rest of us were like, why'd you do that? He was like, well, I felt like it needed to be done. And the rest of us were like, well, we had like a young staff. We had like the young staff, and then we had the old guys. And we were like, did coach ask you to do that? And he's like, no. And I'm like, does coach know you're doing that? And he's like, no. And I'm like, none of the rest of us would do that. Was coach thrilled about it? Absolutely. Because it needed to be cleaned up. But none of us at 22, 23, 24 would have gone in and cleaned the office and thrown stuff out. Because I don't know. I don't know what's good. I don't know whether we need to keep this. So it's like a big part of as a head coach, you need to be able to tell everybody what to do, because you will instead end up, and there's some of you who listen to this right now and maybe have a realization. You think you have lazy coaches. It's no different than Coach Simple Play Fast Win on the field. If you don't tell them what to do, they stand there. If you don't give them key reads on defense, what do? They stand there. If you don't tell the offensive line where to go, you just scream fire out. You don't get a lot out of it. But if you give them detailed instruction on where to go, how to get there, who to work with, what footwork to take, they will do a pretty decent job. And the more talented they are, the better they'll do. And so if you don't have this as a head coach, detailed with freedom, like you said, within these guidelines. If you don't have something out there that says within these guidelines, this is what you do. So you're exactly right. I have a practice plan. It doesn't say Indy 20 minutes. It says 5 minutes key reads, 5 minutes rip drill, 5 minutes tackling, 5 minutes zone drops. Like there's an expectation. Now, my practice plan always says things on it, but I've been coaching for 20 years. And so when my practice plan says something on it, I know, the head coach knows, the coordinator knows, whoever wrote that on there. And sometimes they tell me, and I'm like, you understand, I don't look at this, right? I go, what? Like, I look at what's the end goal for the day. And I do whatever we need to do to get there. They fill it out because it should be filled out. And also because that coach's needs to be filled out because he hasn't been coaching for 20 years. And it looks bad if his says, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And yours says, whatever the frick Joe wants to do. The understanding is that's what mine says. But yeah, you don't need to give me strict instructions. Now, if you want me to pack up the sideline camera, you better tell me, because I haven't been the guy in charge of packing up the sideline camera for a decade.
Right.
You also better have instructions on how to pack up the sideline camera, because I haven't touched the sideline camera for a decade. We haven't had one for a decade, but stuff like that. It's like, well, you need to pack the battle box with the extra jerseys and stuff. I'm like, yeah, I haven't done that in a decade. I did it for 10 years, but I don't do that now. So, you better have instructions on it if it needs to be done. So there are things that you have those younger coaches that need communication. You have them doing it, and it's great that they do it. But if they get, like we all learned a couple of years ago, sometimes you can't just tough it out and come to practice because there's a pandemic, and you better have somebody who knows how to do what they're supposed to do when they're quarantined for 5 days.
Right.
And it might be me, and I don't know how to do all that because I haven't done it. Last time that I did, film exchange. Now this is not true because I was a head coach and I did a lot of stuff. But like, hey, we need somebody to do the film exchange. Like, okay, what McDonald's are we meeting at? Because that's the last time that I was in charge of film exchange. We handed each other DVDs.
Right.
It's
Well, at
not
least it
true.
wasn't
Again, that was not true because I do film exchange all the time. But that's the type of thing that can happen.
Yeah, so the laying of the guidelines and who's doing what. And you talked about not wanting to step on each other's toes, and that's very relevant today. Even though we've gone all digital with a lot of stuff, right? Like there's still, like we're talking about film breakdown. You can erase a lot of somebody's hard work with
Nothing. So we
yes,
don't have that. Aha, that's a good one. I come home. Now I did it this year because I wasn't coordinator. When I was the offensive coordinator 2 years ago, my Friday nights were come home, swing by the store, come home, somebody's loading up the film. I don't know. Not my job. I've graduated from that job. When I was head coach, I was the guy loading up the film. And by the way, we used to have to actually load up the film. Now it just like spits into the thing.
it does.
It's there like when we get in the field. So somewhere, somebody loaded up the film. It's the guy that unpacked the sideline camera, I assume. That was my phone. So I get home. I sit down. The very first thing that I do is not watch the film. The very first thing that I do is tag the plays because it's fresh in my mind what I called, and I don't have somebody write it down. If I can't look at that play and figure out what it was, we got problems. That's my play. I got a call sheet that says we only run 3 things out of this formation. Like we got problems if I can't figure out what it was. I just don't have people write down the play calls for me. But I tag the plays first. Well, I tag in our terminology, and this is the way I speak, and nobody else does. And I realize that, like everybody else, hasn't fully ingrained it in their mind. I've been running this system for a long time. So somebody else went in there and tagged. I don't even think it was our stuff. I think it was maybe another team or whatever. But somebody did go in and tag in like some terminology that they could understand over my stuff. And I was like, bro. So the conclusion of that is my Friday nights. The very first thing I do is tag. The second thing I do is watch the game. Usually get a phone call from the head coach on his way home because he lives an hour away, and he leaves the last one to leave. I'm the first one to leave. And get on the phone for a little while, talk about what I've seen because he hasn't gotten to see much of it yet. And then I go back on and I do our self-scout breakdown. That's Friday night.
Those are long Friday nights, my man.
They are, but remember, I don't work Saturday.
Touche.
So I have to get that done.
Yeah. So yeah,
It's not as long as you
that
think.
can be a part of your
Probably
plan,
like
and you
2
can
hours.
even you don't even have to call it a plan of communication if you want. You can call it whatever you want, but there's got to be a way that people know what to do inside when they enter the door. They know what to do. If that's your weekly schedules, we've talked about practice plans before,
Practice plan is part of it, yeah.
having templates, having shells. I think is what we called them, a practice shell.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of it. Understanding roles, who's watching what on film, who's tagging what on film is a part of it. Who's packing bags, travel bags, who's driving what truck, bus, whatever.
If you've ever gotten to a game and said, "Where is the," and then look at the head coach.
Yeah.
Where are the balls? Where's the camera? Where's?
Yep, that's the one.
Yep. We didn't pack an extra jersey for the kid who plays tight end, but he's the 6th lineman. Inevitably, one of those linemen getting hurt, and one of your JV kids is getting stripped.
Yes.
and then we'll deal with it later.
Yep.
Didn't pack the
Oh, the kicking tees. It's always the kicking tees.
the tees. We had one tee for a while. We got like 36 of them now because it's just
good.
because they
One
cost
in
like
every bag.
$2. It's
Every
like
bag.
the JV would come take the tee for the JV game, and then not put on Thursday night, and then not put the tee back in the bag. That was a communication issue.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of places, like you said, packing things up. One that we had was this was 2 years ago, and I was the offensive coordinator, and we would get into the meeting on Sunday, and our Sunday meetings are about an hour because we're in communication all weekend. Like I said, I talk to the head coach on Friday night. I don't work on Saturday, but if somebody calls me, we talk about whatever. I'm not sitting down at a computer, but I will answer a phone call and talk about football. I'll talk about our game. I won't talk about anything else. All day Sunday, texting back and forth. We're all on text threads now with the entire staff and stuff. Well, we would get into the meeting that only needs to be an hour long because, quite honestly, everything is decided at this point, and I'm not complex. And all of a sudden, it was open mic night, and we had a rule: if you didn't bring it up to me before, let's say the meeting's at 4:00. If you didn't bring it up to me before 4:00, it is not up for discussion. It's not going in.
A good one.
Most of the time, it wasn't going in anyway because I don't like to install a bunch of stuff. But now only one person can break that rule. 2 people. I can break that rule, and the head coach can break that rule. But that was the rule. You look, because we get in the room, and all of a sudden we're like, "Oh, we should do this." And it's like, no, we shouldn't. You should have called me so I could have told you privately why we're not doing that.
Right.
Or I could have stolen it and brought it up in this meeting and pretended it was my own idea. Because you didn't follow the protocol.
That's the real one right there.
That's the real one. Yes. It's a great idea. I can't say mine now.
I think also, this plan has to work with parents. I've heard you talk about, parents always want to meet Friday after the game. And this is where you talk about in your parent meeting, I will not discuss anything with you Friday night. We will talk. You can make an appointment with me minimum 24 hours outside of right now. So probably going to be Sunday or Monday. If you want to come here on Sunday and meet with me before the coaches meeting, let's talk, right? Bring your kid because they're going to be there too. But whatever your rules are, whatever the rules are you govern your kingdom with, that's what you need to have within this plan.
Well, you need to have rules as far as parent communication. Like, we don't talk about other players. I will talk about your son. I will not talk about other players. That's a rule. At one point we had a coach whose rule is I will not discuss playing time. I will discuss what your son needs to do to get better. And theoretically that should lead to more playing time. But I will not discuss playing time. I will not discuss other players. So essentially, when you come to this meeting, just know that the only thing that's going to be going on here, if it's about that. Now, if it's about something else, that's different. But if it's about, playing time, which most of them are, I will only discuss what they need to do to get better. That's it. Won't be anything. Won't go any further. We also, I think you mentioned it. One of our rules is nobody else talks to parents. Yeah. One guy who gets paid enough to talk to parents. Everybody else says he's over there.
Yep. I have to, pat myself on the back. I got some compliments from parents this year, so.
I don't get compliments from parents because I don't talk to them. I'm too busy walking away.
I
don't even know. I don't know anybody's parents. I really don't. It's not paid well enough.
Yep. So anywhere that you've ever been as a coach that you didn't know what to do, or you didn't know if everything was done because you're not tracking that somewhere, or you didn't know the schedule, you didn't know when does spring ball start? Are we doing a true spring ball this year? Um, all of those things can be hammered out, but you've got to have a plan for it now. And so our next question is, why do we need to really worry about this now? Why do we need to have it ready?
You've got to start establishing this now. And why do you need it right now? I'll give you um, I'll give you two examples. One from JDFB weight room and one from athletic speed and movement. If I'm running JDFB weight room, and I've had this before, if you've ever had somebody come into your weight room who's never been there before and they want to show somebody how to do the lift, no. I show them how to do the lift. Somebody else who has been trained by Chris, who writes the JDFB weight room program, somebody else who has studied the program, who has studied the lifts, who understands what we're doing, shows them the lifts. But you, sir, don't wander in and think that just because you have a Gold's membership that you get to jump down on a bench and show them how to bench press. Because I know what you're going to do. You're only going to show the kid with a good bench press already. So no, we're going to go ahead and establish that. Dale came in when the first time that we hired Dale Basquette, who is the brains behind athletic speed and movement in that program. The first time that we hired Dale, Dale has a communication program. He brings it in day one. When he comes into your school, he has a communication program. That communication program is nobody else will talk or teach or be involved. We were at a 5A school with 100 and something kids in the program, and there were 50, 75 kids. I can't remember exactly how many there were, but there were a lot of kids there when Dale came to install what is now athletic speed and movement level 1 that you can get at athleticspeedandmovement.com. And Dale, we said, what do you need us? Because we're coaches, right? What do you need us to do? Well, stand by that trash can. What he said to do was stand there and watch me do it. Because you don't know how to do it now, but you better know how to do it next week when you go to install this on your own. And so his communication plan was, I will handle all of this. And by the way, Dale, I don't think ever had an issue with controlling kids. He's very good at commanding that attention and handling a room. But the plan was, this is how we're going to do it. You are not going to, you're not going to coach today. You're going to watch. And then you can ask me questions afterwards. And the plan was for these 2 hours on the gym floor, you're watching and you don't say anything to the kids. I feel the same way with athletic speed and movement. I don't want somebody else coming in there and telling, what'll happen? We'll go out there and we'll say, okay, this is a 60% speed progression. Well, what if somebody who doesn't know what's going on think? They don't know what a 60% is. They see him running. They think he's loafing, right? You don't need to be involved. You don't know how to coach all the little things in there. You don't know how to coach the hands. And I've seen people try to coach athletic speed and movement without being detail oriented and studying it and having the videos. And it's not good. You miss a lot of detail. So the communication schedule needs to be established now in your off season. The communication schedule for those of you that do 7-on-7, which is more and more of us. A lot of times 7-on-7 is kind of a skeleton crew of coaches, right? You got, hey, the guy who's normally the quarterback's coach is the track coach. So he's not there most of the time. The guy who's, or the receiver coach. And so the receiver coach is also the baseball coach. So we got a JV coach who's coaching the receivers, but he better know that even though we appreciate his time and we appreciate his investment, those are still that guy's receivers at the end of the day. So if he shows up, or vice versa, I mean, if you want it the other way, he shows up on Saturday because baseball doesn't have a game. So he shows up to the 7-on-7 tournament. Is the JV coach the one that's coaching him because he's been doing it all during the week? Or is the varsity receivers coach doing it even though he may have missed some of the things that have been installed or done? How's that communication going to work? Those types of things. And one of the things that I hate more than anything is somebody coaching my guys. That just drives me insane. I understand the coordinator and I understand the head coach, but it's my position group. drives me insane because I'm like, you don't think that I've done this before. Clearly, um, I hate when somebody coaches the long snapper. If I'm supposed to be the long snapper coach, I hate when somebody talks to the center.
Well,
Center makes a bad snap. What do you hear when the center makes a bad snap?
dead snap it.
Well, yeah, for me. No, but you hear 38 people telling him, hey, the snap was low, bad snap. Hey, get the snap up. Da, 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 da. I'm like, first of all, none of you gave any actual productive information. Try doing it this way. Turn your hand. Release the ball. Whatever. Hit the same spot every time. Because none of you know how to coach it. I'm the one that's coaching it. Also, like, he has to do this 7,000 times and then block somebody immediately thereafter. Occasionally, because he's 17, something might go wrong.
Right.
Like, I'm just saying. So, like, those types of things, they need to be established right now. They need to be talked about in your staff meetings. That's one of those things. You made a great point earlier, how we're like, coaches are like afraid to talk about this stuff. Coaches are afraid to come in there and say, this is my group. Shut your mouth. Don't coach them. And the head coach should be the one that says, this is the deal. It shouldn't have to be my rule.
Right.
It should be the head coach's rule. Coach your position group, and that's it. Coordinator, you coach your side of the ball. Do you want the offensive coordinator telling the defensive coordinator why he's wrong on the middle of the field?
No. It's that could make a very bad situation if the offensive coordinator was constantly telling him how to do his job.
Yep. Yeah.
Another reason I think you need to do it now is just we're all coming out of a season. We know that in what's kind of the almost every football wife in America says, all right, I'll see you in December, right? In about July. So I'm bringing that up because it's time for you to buy some time back. You should not have to micromanage everything in your program. Yes, we have to trust but verify, because if you don't, someone along the way will not be a good coach, and all of a sudden you are dealing with something you don't need to deal with, right? You're going to have a bad situation made worse by a coach that was inept or couldn't handle it, whatever.
Well, it's not even just little things can get miscommunicated. I think
Yeah.
you should, I think that you should have your position coaches look once a week, film I'm not asking you to run around with your phone the entire practice like I do. Once a week for 5 minutes. You don't have to film it for 5 minutes. If you film it for 2 minutes, that'll be enough for me. Once a week, pull out your phone, hand it to the hurt kid, and tell them, film this drill for me. Now, if you have people filming, then you can get that. But if you don't have people filming practices, you need to just have one. Have your assistants, if you're the coordinator, once a week film one of your drills. Maybe I'll ask for that drill or whatever. But I just want to verify that you and I are on the same page with this drill and that everything's being done correctly. Or maybe I can just give you some tips, because I've coached every defensive position and most of the offensive positions. And if I haven't coached it, then I certainly know how I want it to be. I can give you some tips on it.
Yeah. So buy your time back now. Get it started now, where it's the norm when you get to summer, when you get to 7-on-7, when you get to spring ball, you get to the season next season. It is the norm that we will operate. You operate freely. I have given you your guidelines. I have given you my intent. Here's what my expectations are. Now, go do your thing, coach. I can't remember who, it may have been you, Joe, but I heard along the way in my very short career, like, if you're just going to stand down here, just buy a ticket and go sit in the stands, right? If you're not coaching. So if you don't know what to do, that's my fault if I were head coach. But so you're just eliminating that. Quit paying people stipend money to do nothing, to show up and do nothing. But you also can't be mad at them if you've not communicated what you need done. I am a volunteer on a varsity staff, and I go every day knowing that those jobs are already done, right? Those guys that are working. I basically didn't even get to really join in until week 7 or something, just because we were dealing with a very robust double games every week freshman season. And so when I show up, I know all this is already done. So what can I add, right? But not everyone has the intestinal fortitude to go, hey, I took all your numbers and put them together here, OC, and here's what you look like on paper. Here's what the opponent's defensive coordinator is staring at now. He knows this about you. Not everyone has that ability on their first year to come in and start coaching a player. So yeah, I mean, it's you need to just over communicate to buy your time back. 2, you need to develop your coaches, and they're never going to gain development. They're not ever going to get any better at being coaches if you're constantly over their shoulder critiquing them all along the way. They've got to find their place, right? They got to find their coaching style. They aren't you. Things need to fit within your system. Joe, I know how you have to feel every single time, because every time I'm assigned as a DC, I go bananas when someone teaches a position group other than the way that I would teach it, right? But I also have to understand that there's coaches out there that are going to be position coaches who have 20 years of experience, and they probably have seen this done successfully. So as long as they're meeting my end goal, we are a spill to force defense.
Yep.
Then I should not care too much about how you get your defensive tackle into the right A or B gap and spilling the football. So, we talk a lot about which hand goes down and what pass rush moves you need and how to train those and personnel group, what size they should be. And we've done many episodes now on what does the perfect defensive tackle look like, or defensive end, and then what does the actual high school one look like, right? At some point, you got to just let people control their position group, have a little bit more ownership, and see if the product comes back at least similar to what you would have, because you just don't have the time to
Well, then I pull the film up and say, like, switch his hands.
Right.
And, that's simple. I always, when if I'm working with an experienced coach, I'll say, this is what needs to happen. I don't care how you get there. I don't go in and hand them. No, I do. I do go in there and hand them the defensive drill system. And I say, this is what I would do and what I recommend. But however you get to the end point is how you get to the end point.
Right.
However, if the finished product isn't good enough, I will step in. You know what I mean? Yep. I will come in and say, we need to get this right. And this is a way to do it.
And that's okay. That's someone who's
fine.
They're not meeting the expectation. They're not meeting the standards. So that's great. So so managing your time, being better at managing your time and in all aspects.
Yep.
Get more done. Be a better coach, because you can work on other things than just having to always run everyone else's job. Give people a job to do and expect that they'll get it done, set the standard, and then go on.
Well, and I think, more and more, one of the other things we haven't gotten to is, we're talking about getting your coaches to do all of these things. There's a lot of things your players should be able to self-manage. We had a game, I think, where our offensive line, I got to the game right before the game, and I'm not the primary offensive line coach. Like I said, I'm there. This past season, I'm there 1 day a week. Well, they didn't have any direction. Something else happened, and they just kind of stood there during pregame warmup, offensive period. Just kind of stood there, and it was it bothered me. But at that point, I was like, why aren't you guys just going down there and going through your blocking scheme?
Yeah, you've never done a pregame before.
Yeah, go through blocking schemes, go through something. Because when I've had good offensive lines, I guarantee you that they would know that. Now they would have been given that before, because I'm when most of the time I am the offensive coordinator, I am the head coach. I am not always here. Sometimes I'm going to say, hey, do some things that are non-contact and safe and teach each other, and I got to go down here and check on this.
Right.
So, but also, just as another example, we knew one year we knew that on Tuesdays we start off in rip drill. So at 3:20, that was pre-practice. Remember, we use a 10-minute pre. At 3:20, pre-practice starts, and it is rip drill. And if there are two guys down there, and neither one of them is coaches, they should be working on rip moves. They should be rip, 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 rip. But there's 4 guys that would be the actual 3-man rip drill, and they would be doing a 3-man rip drill down there. And it's what it should look like. And so they should know you should be setting expectations for your kids. That's why we use a practice shell, like you mentioned. You don't need to spice it up. You need to be quick and efficient. And they should know when we go from here to here, this is what I need. I like the wristbands for scout team.
Yep.
Right. They know Scout O goes and runs. There's always Scout O, always my quarterback doesn't play defense. And so he is the Scout O quarterback as well, unless we're working somebody else. But usually our backup quarterback is a starter on defense, right? Because we don't have that many kids. So our quarterback knows we go Scout O. I have a red gym bag that's sitting over here that's filled with wristbands. The quarterback knows when he hears Scout O to go run over, grab those wristbands, bring them, and start handing them out to the other Scout offense guys. And like those are things that are communicated. And you should write those down. This is what you want to happen. And this all needs to be, that's the other thing. This all needs to be written down. This is not an oral, this is not an oral tradition. Like, this needs to be written down. Scott Burton was the head coach at Highland Springs for a long time, and then he went to Marietta, which was funny because he went to Marietta to, but Scott did a clinic at Charlottesville. Charlottesville used to have a clinic back when there weren't as many clinics as available. There used to be a clinic in Charlottesville, not at UVA, just randomly at a Holiday Inn. And Scott Burton spoke at that clinic, and he pulled up a PowerPoint that you couldn't read it.
Right.
It was too small of a font. But it might have been a PowerPoint. It might have just been the straight up. I think it might have even been on an overhead projector. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. And it had very, very detailed the role of every single coach written out. And if you look at my program manual that's in the resources folder for JDFP Premium Coaching Systems clients, you will see that I have what does a head coach do, what does a coordinator do, what does an assistant coach do, what is your role, and that's written out. It's only about 2 pages on mine because it was a program manual and not a specific, like, here's what we're going to do. But that, what's the role of the JV coach? What's the JV coach's job? When's the JV coach going to, when does the JV leave practice? When is time to work on JV stuff? Because our JVs have to practice with us because we don't have enough guys for you to be gone all the time. So, that's all written out. It should be. But Scott had the most detailed thing I'd ever seen. It was the first time I'd ever seen it. Rush Probst had a video that was on Championship Productions, and it was his yearly calendar. No, it was on Championship Productions, my own Coach's Choice. It was his yearly calendar. This is, I think, when he was at Hoosier. And it was Hoover. I'm sorry, Hoosier. So when he was at Hoover. And, one of the thing that sticks out to me was he said January. This is, of course, a different level of football. Head coach, December, January, February, something like that. Recruiting. Right. Up until signing day, the head coach does not show up in the weight room because he had 18 D1 kids. He had work to do. It's not on the schedule for us. But that was his schedule, and it was laid out, and it was this person, the strength coach. He had a strength coach, is going to be running the weight room, and it said the head coach, and it would say like the head coach will walk through the weight room or something like that. But it was very detailed, what was going to happen and how it was going to happen. It needs to be a written out plan.
Yeah, we, military wise, we call that an SOP, a standard operating procedure, and the SOP should cover everything.
We use that in business too, huh?
There you go. So there's no question. I should never, not that you can't have a situation that isn't covered, but you should cover almost all situations, right?
But if I know from business wise, my employees are instructed that we have an SOP on it. If something comes up and we don't have an SOP, the instruction is, especially if something comes up, like say something we haven't used before, a new system or something like that. Like we're using a new system for the podcast. So right now I'm doing a little bit of the podcast editing and then shipping it off because I have to figure it out. But then once I'm done with it, I make a video of it. I send it to them. They make an SOP of it. So if it doesn't have an SOP, it should go in. Just like in your playbook or in your system, if you run across something that you don't have a way to defend it and you create one, it goes into the system now. It
Right.
doesn't just drift off into the ether and then next year you're like, so our double wing defense, always come back to it. You know, we went and got we Rick Stewart shared it with us. We talked to Tim Murphy about it and we ran it and it worked really, really well. We ran it in 2018, I think was the first year that we ran it. And it worked really well in the first game. And then we had to use it again in another game. And it was great. Well, 2 years later, when we saw another double wing team, we didn't have to come up with a solution. It was now part of the, like I said, what do we do when a double wing team comes? Here it is. Charger bolt. Let's go.
Yep, and that works for everything. I mean, you talk about like ineligible players. It doesn't matter. You talked
Yeah.
about missing kicking tees. You talk, what is the plan? And you've already written it down. And you don't have to go back and you just can eliminate that time to problem solve. You've already done that. So,
And within your program, you know, you talk about like in a war, things will come up you can't just have a plan for. But what we're talking about is like a kid did something that when we wrote these team rules out, it never even crossed our mind that a kid could do something this stupid. But in our rule, it said, if somebody does something so stupid we haven't even thought of it, send them directly to the head coach.
right. You can
Well,
always
now, when the head coach finishes making his decision on the dumbest thing he's ever seen, inevitably, if he coaches long enough, another kid will come in and do the same stupid thing, and he now has back in the manual. This is what I do when kid does the most unbelievably dumb thing a second time.
We'll jump to the last part here, and that's how to implement. Apparently, that's a hard word. Your new plan with your current staff and players.
Probably the part that gets the ball dropped on it the most, and myself included, is you have all the plans in the world and you have that staff meeting at the beginning of the year where you hand out the manual and you go over everything, and then it doesn't get enforced. You don't stop when this coach was supposed to be the coach who checks the locker room and sweeps the locker room. By sweep, I mean make sure that everybody's out or whatever when we go to get on the bus to go home.
Very militaristic term you use there. I'm really enjoying it.
Well, we
Sweep the locker room.
Well, I've worked. Listen, I coached at Fort Lee for 12
Well, that's
years.
right. You are up there. I forget that
So
somehow.
they probably picked up a lot of that stuff. But you know, there's a coach who's responsible for sweeping the locker room. You know, one last check before the bus pulls out at the end of an away game. Okay. That coach didn't check the locker room and nobody said anything and everything's fine until a kid doesn't get home. And then we realize nobody was checking on that. And there's a kid sitting in the locker room 30 miles away and we got a problem. But obviously there's simpler issues than that. One that is for me is I don't want anybody standing around. I scout team. You got the guys standing 30 yards back and they're not involved. If you're worried about getting run over, stand over here behind the offense. It's perfectly fine. You know, it's perfectly fine to stand by that. It's what we do during scrimmages, right? We don't stand out there and defend. We do it during 7-on-7. During 7-on-7, you've always got middle of the field closed because
I'm thinking middle of the field closed at scrimmages because I'm there, baby.
That happens sometimes too, but it's usually 7-on-7, middle of the field closed because the coaches, there's 3 coaches standing in the middle. If it's too high, but then there's 3 coaches in the middle of the field, so we're gonna have a really hard time hitting posts, you know, hitting the smash concept or whatever. Down the middle when you run the guy down the middle and smash, not the actual smash, because nobody's standing out there. So like what the old rule was with the hard-nosed coaches was none of you coaches better have your hands in your pockets. I was like, it's kind of stupid. My hands are cold. But then you realize, what are all the guys who aren't coaching doing? Standing there with their hands in their pockets.
Yeah.
It's not a bad rule. It's pretty easy to follow. And if you don't have your hands in your pockets, you got to figure out something to do because your hands are cold, right? Eventually, later in the season. But don't stand around with your hands in your pockets. It used to be the rule. And that just meant, but the purpose of the rule was don't stand around, coach. And so that rule doesn't get enforced sometimes. Don't talk to the parents, doesn't get enforced a lot. First time that is, as a head coach, the first time that your JV assistant, who's just a lay coach, who lives there, who played there, who works there, who knows all the parents, and he's been there for 20 years. The first time that he talks to a parent in a professional capacity, you could still talk to him. You just don't talk about football. And if they ask you here, you tell them, I cannot talk about that here. I can't stop what you do. I can ask you not to, but I can't stop what you do on a Saturday night. But, if you talk to him here, that's fine in a friendship. But the first time that you come in and say, yeah, Mrs. Such and Such was talking to me about such and such playing time, and I told her that he needed to, spend more time in the weight room or something like that. Like, no. Harmless? Absolutely. But we have to have, because the next thing you talk to him about is, yeah, I think you should be playing him more too.
Right.
That's how that escalates.
Now we have a divide.
So the biggest thing is you have to be, if you say, I need you to film a drill once a week and send it to me. If you don't, I'm warning you about it. And here's the deal. The next time, I'm going to draw up what your drills are. I will take, if you cannot do the things that I ask you to do, we're going to have an adult conversation and I'm going to take things away from you. I don't think it's a very big deal to ask you to pull out your phone and film 2 minutes of drill, hand it to a hurt kid, hand it to a manager, say, can you film this for 2 minutes and then upload it to Huddle for me? If you can't do that. So then what I have to do is on Wednesday, because we don't have drills we don't have Indy on Thursday. On Wednesday, I haven't gotten something. I better remind you going out to practice. I'll put it on your practice plan. Film this drill. I'll have a manager go over there with her phone. Film. Send it to me. Don't send it to me. Send it to somebody. Send it to one of the kids and they can send it to me. I don't want the female manager sending me texts. Send it to one of my linemen, and then he can send it to me. Look, I don't mess around. You ain't gonna get me. You ain't gonna end my coaching career.
Here's the thing: is there's so many professional apps now that like capture everything,
Sure.
and nobody can delete it, and like there's ways. But I understand your sentiment.
Yeah, no, we're not even gonna mess around with it. But yeah, so whatever you decide to do, like you said, it's not just you need to have checks and balances. Don't just say, yeah, I'm going to go back and verify it. Like, you need to have a plan in place and an alarm that goes off when these things aren't done. If I see a coach standing 30 yards away and not coaching for the last 10 minutes of practice, we're going to talk about it as soon as we get in the office. Hey, man, not mad because it's been going on since the beginning of time, but we can't do that. I got these young kids out here giving it all for us on scout team. I need you saying something to them. If you need ideas on what to say to them, I'll write out index cards. You can just pull one out. Like say, block somebody,
Show more effort.
Yeah.
Play with more confidence.
Catch the ball. Like, it's not that hard, but I need you to say something. I need you to be doing something. I prefer you actually be coaching them productively. But if you can't do that, then you can just yell wrap up.
I might just try to sell that, like index cards with random football sayings.
Here's my favorite thing we ever did for punishment. I think I got it from Jerry Campbell. Jerry Campbell had some great ideas on like weight room and those types of things. Jerry Campbell had a really strict rule. At least he did in his, and this is another communication, so it's not a pointless story. Jerry Campbell's rule was if you were late to a meeting once, you had a punishment. If you were late to a meeting the second time, the rest of the team had a punishment. And then the third one, that was when there was like discipline. Because like, I don't want to suspend a kid for the game for being a minute late to the meeting, but the standard is the standard, and there's something. And the cards, the best thing was he had these. and I used them. I only got to use them a couple times. Our kids were pretty good, and maybe we didn't enforce them enough. But I had a stack of cards. I got these ideas from Jerry Campbell, and there were 10 index cards, and they were just punishments. They were like, 50 push-ups, 50 burpees, something like that. One of them was this holding your arms out for like a minute or something.
It's terrible, isn't it?
And when the kid got it, he was like, yes. And then he did it. And he was like, oh my God. One of them was nothing. There was a get out of jail free card in there.
Oh.
And we had a kid pull that one. And he was so confused, right? He's just like, so what happens?
I'm going to get in trouble? Can I draw again?
You must be living right. We're just going to assume that like that one's in there because you had a good reason to be late. I don't need to hear it. You were late. That's all that really matters. But if you had a really good reason, it's like the Salem witch trials. It's like, if she's not a witch, then she'll fall. And so, but you got to get right. That was how they push you off a cliff. If you were a witch, you'd fly away and they'd know that you were a witch. And if you weren't a witch, you'd fall and they know that you weren't a witch. You're dead. But
you weren't a witch.
You weren't a witch. Whoops, our bad. So he had those cards, but the communication there was, to be on time to meetings, and it was very, very specific, laid out, and they knew who the coach was. Most of us have that. We have the punishment coach. We have the coach who's the guy that stays after. Sometimes it rotates, but you have the guy that stays after and does that. He's the guy who has all the creative, miserable things to do. My thing with punishment is like, it needs to go one of two ways. It either needs to be productive, which is hard, but if you have a staff that, every position group has is in charge of punishment, right? The problem with when you're not two platoon, that always works better when you're two platoon, because number one, you only have like your 8 kids or whatever. And you can put them through, the most miserable drill that you have or something that's actually productive for football for 10 minutes. But if you have a kid that if you coach both sides of the ball, like which position group is responsible for him? Right. Which was he late for? And if you have, you can have offense day, defense day.
Extreme ownership says all of them.
Yes. So, the biggest thing to me on implementing is that you come back and you check on it and you have a plan for checking on it.
I think,
for example, by the way, you check that I would have, you have 2 people on the box, or you have 2 people, 2 people responsible for this or 2 people responsible for that. Maybe you have a third person who checks it when it gets there or whatever. You always have, now obviously for things like packing the footballs. Well, you'll know real quick if he didn't do his job.
Right. I think the number one answer is bring a complete plan. Not the number one answer. The answer that I'm giving is bring a complete plan to your staff as soon as possible.
Sharing it with them.
Use what's left. This comes out, Thanksgiving break will be over, I guess. So stinks for you. So use your December. Sit down and write out, what is your program? What are your day-to-day operations? What are the expectations from every coach? And it doesn't take too long, because I think you'll find pretty quickly it's pretty repetitive on the day-to-day stuff. But when you get to game day, you probably have it written out anyway somewhere, right? So now just put a name to it, or a position coach. That way, in case that name changes, that's okay. By
the way, you don't have to be a head coach.
No,
you can be a position coach, and you can write out things like, when you come to the offensive, when it's indies, and you come to me, you will be lined up in 5 lines. The first line will be up, and the second line will be behind them, or however. And we'll go from there. But you have a spot to go to, because what happens? They all kind of mosey down there, and the herd wanders. Mine. I always would there were 2 set points as the offensive line coach. There were 2 places we were going. One, they were going to hear partner up and spread out. And that meant that we were going to go through what was basically our pregame. We were going to go through zone right, zone left, reach right, reach left, down block right, down block left, skip pull right, skip pull left, whatever we're going to do. Or they would hear first group up, 4-2 out front. and they knew we were bird walking. We don't have a lot of drills. We don't have to go through a lot of crap.
It's true.
4-2 up bird walk for, and they knew, like, the first 5 are up there. They're screaming at the JV kids. There's 6 guys need to be out there because what do the JV kids want to do? They want to stand next to the trash can. So those 5 offensive linemen are screaming at the JV kids, get out there. We need another guy here because they know what a 4-2 is supposed to look like. So you got to plan for it. And then because I come down there, if I get there, I don't jog to stations anymore. It's overrated. My knees hurt really bad from weightlifting. I got a lot of tendonitis.
Got all those medals.
I can jog, but I choose not to because I have tendonitis in my knees. And comes and goes though. But if I get down there and we said 4-2 out front and I got a 3-1, ain't good. There better not be 2 other guys standing around.
Yeah. So bring a complete plan to your staff so that there's no questions. And if you don't want, honestly, some people are probably going to throw a fit about this at the beginning because, oh, you don't trust us? Why are we having to write stuff down? Well, because staffs change. And you, at some point, are probably going to change schools. And, hey, I just want to be able to take all this with me. I just want to make sure that all this is good to go.
I would use the example of this is written down because if you're not here, somebody else better know how to do your job. Now,
right.
If I'm talking to somebody who's experienced and knows what they're doing and I can trust, you know that the end result is the ball bag better be on the bus and it better have 12 balls in it and 2 of them better be game balls.
Right.
And you know that. So I don't care how it gets done. If you have the quarterback do it, that's perfectly fine. But if you're not here, I better be able to have somebody else do it. Yeah. And we've all learned that at any point in time, we may not be able to be here. Something could happen.
COVID did make that obviously apparent.
COVID made it apparent, but I mean, it happened at a much higher rate during COVID. And it still happens at a higher rate because they still have, some quarantine rules and stuff. Doesn't happen much. I mean, we don't have much, but it can happen. But before that, we had H1N1. We had coaches that were not allowed to be there for that. So
forgot about H1N1.
H1N1 was before that. We all know that we're football coaches, and like if it's Friday night, if it ain't COVID, and guess how you can make sure it's not COVID? Don't take the test. Because it's Friday night in the fall.
But it's your podcast.
What? It's Friday night in the fall. I'm like, that doesn't feel like COVID.
I think COVID has more symptoms, probably.
Yeah. Look, if it were 2020, I'd have a different slant on it. But, like, if we got the sniffles, we're going to be there. But things can happen. We had one of our coaches' son, very young son, had a fall, and they didn't know what was going on, and he was in the emergency room, and it was 6:30, and he took off, and he was the special teams guy, right? Depth charts and all that sort of stuff. Well, why do we have printed depth charts? He knows who the backups are. Look, we only got 27 kids on the team. When 11 kids are on your kickoff team, all right, one of them goes down. Let me tell you how many backups there are. One.
Like, there's one backup.
We don't need a chart, but we need a chart. Because if number 12 is out because he just got hurt or he's on offense and needs a break, right? He was the one that ran the touchdown, whatever. I need to know who number 13 is.
Right.
I don't have more than about 15 that can go out there, that we trust. I got a front line backup, I got a second line backup, and I got a returner backup on kickoff return. I mean, so, but we had a sheet. It's not a problem.
So in closing, just, I think, maybe we even mistitled this. Maybe this isn't a plan of communication. Maybe this is a plan of operations. Maybe this is a standard operating procedure. But you've got to have something, and we as coaches are bad about, we just assume everyone knows. We do it when we're coaching kids. We assume that everybody knows football. We do it when we're talking to other coaches.
Maybe we should call it that. Maybe it should be like the standard operating procedures.
There you go. I'll change the title.
Figure it out on the fly.
That's right.
We are not always, you know, we have a protocol for how this goes. I changed the title. Yeah.
We're going to change the title. We assume a lot when we're talking to other coaches that they understand our terminology, that they understand what we call a certain formation or a certain. I mean, talk about running back, H-back, tight end. Like, what do you call him? I call him a sniffer. Well, what is he? Is that 11 personnel? Is that 12 personnel? Is that 21 what? Right. So these are all things that you can put in your standard operating procedure, your SOP. God, I really feel like it's just a military podcast at this point. But
we use that all the time, by the way. We have stacks of SOPs.
There you go. So I think that you need to have a plan. There's no questions about how things are going to get done. When someone new walks in, you can literally hand them the manual, and they know exactly how everything operates.
The key.
And they can see, hey, here's a void. Like, who's tagging efficiency on huddle or quick cuts or whatever you got, right? Oh, well, weirdly enough, nobody was, because that's not a metric we've measured before. Hey, can I tag that? Absolutely. And guess what? Now it's in the freaking SOP. And now we got another thing. And then what do we do with that data? And it goes on and on and on. And you get to a point of you have everything handled and it's in the book. And that's pretty wonderful. But people should never have to worry about not getting enough done or not knowing what to do, because you're going to tell them now that you've heard this episode.
We went through, by the way, just like Coach Simple Play Fast Win, you can apply these things in your real life. We have a house cleaning service. It comes once every few weeks. I can't remember I think it's every 2 weeks. We got it when my wife went through a very rough pregnancy, and then we were just like, you know what, we're sticking to this. This is
pretty nice.
But you don't always get the same person coming to the house, and sometimes it's not done. And we talked about firing the company, and then we talked to other people, and they're like, yeah, this happens to us too. And I was like, well, how about this? When the person comes in, if it's the person who it usually is, we know she's going to do a great job. Although she forgot a bedroom one time. But now they come in. Here's what needs to be done. Guess what? All of a sudden, everything's done right.
That's right. I still don't know where everything goes.
Why the service doesn't have that on file, I don't know. But
right. Sweet. Let's pay some bills to get out of here, man. Join.joedanielfootball.com. Get access for $1. That's 7 days of access to the full site. All of the whatever level that you decide that you're going to pay for the rest of the year. That's what your dollar gets you. You get 4 defensive packages, 4-3, 4-2-5, 3-3 stack, and a 3-4. All those can be ran in one system. So if you want to be multi-front, which is something I'm really digging right now, then do that. All right. And your terminology stays the same, and maybe your position changes name because, whatever. If you're small enough, that kid just backs up and takes his hand out of the dirt, and you can just make that the same position name. It's up to you. Pistol power offense is also in there. It doesn't matter what offense you want to run. You don't have to be in the pistol. You don't have to run power, although I don't know why you wouldn't. It's 2023, people. Run power, okay? And then run counter. And then run both zones. I don't know what I'm saying now. Chalkboard forum, come in, ask questions. It's always open, okay? You can have a epiphany at 1:30 in the morning where you're drinking cold brewskis and be like, I wonder why no one's ever snapped it to an offensive tackle and just let him run. And you can say, what are the pros and cons of snapping it to an offensive tackle and letting him run? And we're going to let you know. Joe will probably get to it a couple days later, but lots of coaches in there answering questions these days. Chalk Talks. We are off until we get back from Christmas break. And then we'll be bi-weekly. So every other week. And I don't know if that's, we'll talk, probably not going to be New Year's. So maybe we'll start that second week. The schedule is to be determined. Game film analysis, which is that is the cream on top here. The game film analysis, you send in your game film and you can use it all year long. You don't only use it in season. Okay. If you're wanting to send in something previous, you buy the thing, you get 1 game a week, but you send in your game film. Joe or one of his guys that he's brought on that are experts in this field are going to watch it and they're going to give you the low-hanging fruit. And then as you go through your film, if it's in season, that fruit should get a little higher. You should be solving those problems and moving on up. Even if your head coach won't let you solve that problem, Joe's still going to tell you about it every time. And then you'll just say, yes, got it, and move on to the next thing. Game film analysis is amazing. All right.